Good morning on this Sunday, the 1st of September, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. A huge political week in Georgia as Senator Johnny Isakson announces he will resign at the end of the year. Georgia's governor and emergency officials are preparing for Dorian, and the state steps in to investigate Sterilization in Cobb County after unreported leaks, even an explosion that injured a worker. Theron, Phil, Janelle, and Alexis are all here. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Senator Johnny Isakson shocked the political world this week, announcing he will resign his position at the end of the year due to health concerns from Parkinson's and a recent surgery. Longtime friends from both sides of the aisle say Senator Isakson is one of a kind.
It did not surprise me. I just didn't know when it was coming.
Former Governor Roy Barnes knew Parkinson's has taken its toll on his friend, Senator Johnny Isakson. So Barnes says he knew the day would come when Isakson would resign. After more than 4 decades in public office, Senator Isakson said this week his resignation goes against every fiber in his being, but that it was time. Fox 5's former political analyst Matt Towery ran for lieutenant governor when Isakson ran for governor in 1990. The two have remained close friends.
He never lets you down, and I think that's sort of how he approached politics as well, because he never let the state of Georgia down. He always put the public first in every decision that he made.
And perhaps that's why so many Democrats have been commenting on Isakson's resignation, many of them calling him a statesman as well as a friend.
Johnny Isakson is the kind of person that we need at times like this, when we're so polarized. Someone who is liked by all, both sides of the aisle, and somebody who is willing to talk to the other side.
Roy Barnes says it so well, and there are just so many angles to cover here. First, let's talk about the announcement. Phil, anytime that you talked to Isakson or his aides, it was always, this is not a remote possibility of him resigning, but things changed rather quickly.
Well, that's right. I know the senator had wanted to finish out his term. We're almost right in the middle of his term, and I think the health issues just got too much, and I think obviously you had to make the right decision for yourself and your family, and I think he obviously had told the governor what was going on, so it was somewhat choreographed, if you want to use that word. But he will be staying on through December 31st, and that, of course, gives the governor time to figure out who do I appoint.
All right, Theron, before we get to all these names that are just floating around in our heads, let's talk about the ramifications. We thought Georgia was a big battleground state before this announcement. Imagine now 2 U.S. Senate races on the ballot. What does this mean? Is money just going to pour into the state?
Well, I want to echo what former Governor Roy Barnes just said. I mean, what Georgia has experienced for so long, over 20 years in the Congress, is in Senator Isakson being a reliable conservative voice. He's sort of pushed back on some of the Trump tactics that we've seen in Washington. Now, you're right, Lori, we were already a battleground state, and I think the recent governor race showed us that. But as we now know that there was going to be already a lot of money and attention for the Purdue and whoever the Democratic nominee race was going to be, now you add what is a jungle sort of election, which California has a lot, where you're going to have all these folks kind of running in the November election. And so, you know, my old coach from high school, Billy Henderson, used to say, you know, buck up your chin straps. You're going to do some hitting today. I would tell the Georgia viewers that you better buck up your chin straps, because there's going to be a lot of ad wars and a lot of grassroots campaigning going on in Georgia.
Absolutely. And Janelle, so let's talk names here. On the Republican side, Governor Kemp has some time to decide, but we're hearing so many names. I mean, we've got Attorney General Chris Carr, former Governor Sonny Perdue, Congressman Doug Collins, former Congresswoman Karen Handel, perhaps a political outsider. What are you hearing?
Same thing that you're hearing. I'm hearing a lot of names, but I think what's most important to keep in mind is that, yes, this could be an opportunity for the governor to do something historic, but I think what's most important is that we put someone in that position that can win elections, not just the upcoming election, but continue the election, so that we can maintain the Republican leadership.
And Alexis, before I get to you on the Democratic side, Phil, this person really has to hit the ground running in terms of campaigning also, not only being a U.S. Senator, but I mean, here comes the campaign right around the corner, and suburban women are going to be big.
You're making a very good point. You're not going to have a placeholder. You want someone in there that the governor can pick, that can, to Theron's point, have the money and raise it, and then to Janelle's point, you got to be electable, and that goes for both parties, whoever they're going to be picking. And so, yeah, I've heard some more names too, Lori. I've heard that perhaps our 2 Georgia congressmen might be in the mix, Doug Collins and perhaps Tom Graves. I've heard Ambassador Randy Evans. I've heard State Senator Burt Jones. We could go on and on. On the Democrat side, I've heard Michelle Nunn, who would be a kind of a center-left candidate as opposed to a socialist. That could be one that we would want to watch. But I'll let you analyze that.
Alexis,
I don't know any socialists who are running for anything.
But let's get to you, because
I could give you a list.
I want to ask you, you know, the Isakson race, to replace Isakson is a little bit different because there's no primaries.
Right.
So do Democrats, do you think, have a better chance?
Well, possibly. I think it all depends on who he selects and if it's a viable candidate. I've also heard Sonny Perdue as a, you know, that would really shake things up and confuse people a lot.
Perdue on the ballot.
Right, exactly. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. So I think it just depends on who this person is, whether they'll have a chance, and also depends on the turnout in 2022.
And Theron, Phil mentioned Michelle Nunn, but you know, there's Jason Carter, there's Michael Thurman, there's a lot of Democratic names out there too who have not thrown in their name just yet.
Right,
well, one of the things I also want to kind of echo what Phil and Janelle just said is that this is a unique opportunity for this governor who has made a move towards the middle. He's appointed a lot of African-American qualified judicial nominations for judges. This is a great opportunity for him to appoint a minority. He could appoint an African-American woman, or he can appoint a white woman to basically combat this issue with suburban women in Georgia. But no, if you look at this, since Stacey Abrams has decided that she has come out and said she's not going to run, then the next person that is in line based on electability, someone who's done it before, someone who can appeal to the base, someone who can get moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats and independents. And there's only one name, that's Michael Thurman. I don't know if he'll do it. I think he loves his job as being DeKalb County CEO, but Democrats are gonna have to get in the room and say, okay, what's our 50+1 strategy? It just can't be a progressive message or a liberal message or a moderate message. We gotta figure out who's the best person, he or she, I believe it's Michael Thurman, that can win this election in November, because as you just pointed out, Lori, is that this is not a primary, so you're going to have everyone in November, and
possibly a
Republicans
runoff.
and Republicans and Democrats can vote in this November election for this open seat. So that's. But I would pose that question back to Janelle and Phil. I hope they would join me in calling on Governor Kemp to seriously look at a minority Republican. It will be monumental. It will be so historic to do. But also, there's plenty of qualified white women out there in the Republican Party that I think should be considered as well. And I didn't hear that.
And there's plenty of qualified white males too. I know you don't.
I would say Karen Handel.
I mean, and I would say to your point, Theron, that like I said, it is an opportunity to be historic. But I think we do have to look at who's electable. And I think because of the fact that this became kind of abruptly, that people may not have had an opportunity to kind of groom themselves. But what you just said is so true. I mean, the governor has shown that he is for diversity. So I think, you know, he's already put that out there. We know that he is for diversity. He's done a lot with it. So I look forward to seeing what he does.
Do you think there's an African-American Republican out there right now that can be elected? Because what you just kind of said is that they got to be groomed. They maybe not ready for the challenge. But is there one? I mean, you talk to them a lot.
Yeah, I do. I do believe there are African-American Republicans who are electable. However, that's not, so what I'm saying, I'm not saying that we should not put an African-American in there. What I don't want to do is create this race war that I feel Democrats want to do most all the time, where it's whenever there's an opportunity for Republicans to do something, it's always have to be minority focused. And while the governor has shown that he is minority driven, and that's what all I'm saying is that we don't want to make this a race war.
And yeah, you emphasize race here. We're colorblind. We want a qualified candidate. What's going to happen now is a vetting process. That's going to be I think you're aware of that. We've got to see who has the strengths and the weaknesses to withstand on the Republican side, the left-wing media, and then on the Democrat side, can they withstand the right-wing social media?
But isn't it just ironic that African-American male and myself, who's a Democrat, is encouraging Republicans to look beyond the white men that have been nominated time and time again?
Thank you so much for you looking out for the Republican Party.
I'm just saying. I'm colorblind as well, but I'm saying
you like white males, don't you?
No. What I'm saying is, this is a historic opportunity for this governor, who I've complimented on this show. So don't phrase me as this anti-Governor Kemp guy. That if you're looking at this, there are qualified African Americans and there are qualified white women that are there, like Karen Handel, like other people, that I think that the Republican Party, while you talk about all this stuff that we should do for the minority community, you talk about all this stuff we should do in a bipartisan way, I just want to make sure that the Republican talking heads are mentioning some qualified African Americans.
Are there qualified white males that can run on the Democrat side?
Absolutely. We've elected them time and time again.
And you did mention that Governor Kemp has appointed minorities to the judicial.
I'm here to shake it up today.
We just have to be careful not to make this a race war, as Democrats always love
No, it's
to
not.
do.
It's not about.
And that's, so while I am most certainly for my community, I just want to make sure we are not making this a race war.
Who makes it a race war?
Right, exactly. And I'm saying if you
absolutely incorrect about that. It's not.
Well, we
Democrats.
said 3 times that this is a historic opportunity, so I think
you want to beat this drum. I think we need to be analyzing who's going to look out for the people of Georgia, who has Georgia values, which are center-right political values, and not the
and
hard
no doubt,
that is not necessarily true anymore, Phil.
But no doubt, this is probably the most important decision that Governor Kemp will make in the upcoming months. So with that, we're going to wrap it up because coming up, Governor Kemp is also preparing the state for Dorian on this Labor Day weekend. Stay tuned.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Okay. Could this be a big first hurricane test for Governor Brian Kemp as Dorian eyes Florida and Georgia? Certainly farmers in South Georgia don't need another hit there. And here we go.
Yeah, this is interesting because you know that, and I'm going to commend Republican leadership in Washington and this governor. You know, we came and we saw what the hurricane damage did in the past, and so I think that this governor should be commended for proactively having a press conference. You know, it kind of got lost this week in all the Johnny Isakson news and all the stuff with Sterilization, but he did proactively come out and say, hey, we want to make sure that this, and also I want to give a big shout out to Delta Airlines, which was going to be one of my winners, that basically said we're going to cap all the flights, make sure that people who want to travel out of different areas to get to safe places, they will basically make sure they work with these people. So that's a big shout out to Delta.
That's
right.
Awesome.
Also, the governor did declare a state of emergency for 12 Georgia counties. Yeah. So
well, we all agree on that.
I know. I think we all.
Alexis, did you just give him a compliment?
I think I did.
All right, well, moving on because the issue of legalized gambling is on the horizon yet again in Georgia, but this time it's with a twist. Are we likely to see sports betting before casinos and horse racing? Estimates are that sports betting could raise $50 million a year. Would it go to Hope and pre-K? Senator Brandon Beach says that he's open to all options, perhaps health care and transportation. Phil, what are we likely to see here?
After talking with Senator Beach, the strategy right now, along with Representative Ron Stevens on the House side, is to combine the 3 elements, your destination resort gambling, your local option pari-mutuel horse wagering, and yes, the sports betting is popular all over the country. Other legislatures have done it. You do have to tie it to the Hope Scholarship. There's only one, under the Constitution, only one gambling source is allowed, and that's, of course, your lottery that we all are aware of. Gambling's already here in Georgia. It's just, should it be expanded? And now with Governor Kemp's announcement that we need to be trimming in state government, we are looking for new sources of revenue. And I think this will definitely be on the front burner as the session opens for the General Assembly in January.
I think, Theron, for as long as I've been in Georgia, we've been talking about casino gambling, and that's been a long time. I mean, is this the year? I think I've asked that several times.
You have, and I feel like we've been talking about it for at least 5 years. Look, I think this year you're going to have an appetite to hear more about it. Speaker Ralston responded to the governor's request for cuts and say, hey, one of the things that we got to do is absolutely streamline government, but also look at alternative ways of revenue. And so he is to be commended for kind of putting that argument back out there and sort of saying, hey, this is a alternative way of revenue that we should look at. But I think it's real. I think Phil is right. Sports betting is something that has been successful in other states. I think that the Georgia folks are going to looking at that success. And then I think, when you have a casino, and it's called destination resort casino gambling, I do think that there's an appetite if it's tied to the Hope Scholarship and for needs-based scholarships. I think that's going to be the key for.
And the people have to vote on it.
Yeah,
needs-based. We've heard that before too, Janelle. I mean, we did hear some dwindling numbers about the Hope Scholarship because the Zell Miller Scholarship, which pays 100% of tuition, is really eating up some of the funds. So is it geared toward Hope here?
I hope so. I hope attacking, or I'm sorry, putting gambling in regards to anything that leads to economic growth or anything for our education, I think is a positive. Considering the pros and cons of it all, I do think that this is something we should look into, and I think we should let the voters decide as to whether this is something we want for the state.
Is it time?
Right, I think so, and I also think we ought to look at other avenues like the hemp industry. Growth there in processing and all of that could be very lucrative for the state.
All right, well, I want to move on because we had some late breaking news. Larry Scott, the agency is reporting the Atlanta contract compliance officer resigned. I think it was his statement that kind of left us with a little bit of questions. He says, "It is my hope that in the times you interacted with me, you had the opportunity to assess my full character." Darren, let's just start with you. What do you think that means? Is there something else coming here?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the game of predicting what may be coming. I think at the end of the day, Larry Scott made a decision that was based on what he thought was best for his professional career and his family. He resigned. I think there's a lot of speculations of what this resignation means, but I do want to push back on some of the things that I read about his involvement in the procurement process. And I think the procurement process in the city of Atlanta was not fairly characterized on this show last week. At a time where we know that Mayor Bottoms has come in and introduced this e-procurement program. Anytime that any procurement is released, they've extended the 15 days for people to be able to look at the procurements and the RFP process. And one of the things that Phil has talked about is this new auditor's office, right? So now auditor is there from start to finish to make sure there's no funny business with these reports. But I think that if you talk to many folks who dealt with Larry Scott at City Hall, this is kind of shocking because he's really been helpful to a lot of minority businesses that want to legally and ethically do work with the city of Atlanta. So I think that the mayor is going to act swiftly to fill this void.
Phil, very quickly if you can.
Well, Larry Scott was a puppet of former Mayor Kasim Reed. He was put in there in 2014. The Mayor Bottoms should have gotten rid of him. He's the linchpin of all the minority contracting. You talk to virtually any city councilman in Atlanta, they will disagree with the mayor. The procurement process is a mess. One of the reasons he may have left is that it's totally paralyzed. We talked about they can't rebid, so some of Reed's old cronies are continuing to get their bids, and so it's a mess. And I think also his resignation is part and parcel of the continuing federal corruption investigation, and I think he felt, I need to get out.
But one of the things about what I did, I went back to YouTube, right? And our shows on YouTube every week, so I encourage our viewers to watch it. But I remember Phil Kent vividly commending this mayor and saying, hey, take your time, make sure these procurements are done right. And he praised the e-procurement system. He praised.
I did, and I still do. I still do.
So now to say.
But she should have gotten rid of Larry Scott.
But I've also talked to some of these councilmen, too, who I know you talk to on a regular basis, and they haven't publicly come out and said that they don't have faith in this mayor about the procurement process. They have come out and said, hey, let's move these bids along the right way. And I think that's what the city is doing right now.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Coming up, Georgia's Environmental Protection Division launches an investigation into Sterigenics after unreported leaks of toxic gas, even an explosion at the Cobb County plant. We'll discuss right after the break.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
More disturbing news coming out of a Cobb County plant that sterilizes medical equipment and emits what the EPA has classified as a cancer-causing toxic chemical. The AJC now reports there was an explosion that injured a worker last year that went unreported, and last month a toxic gas leak forced employees to evacuate the facility. The company says they didn't have to report because the leaks were under the reporting threshold. Still, Janelle, this doesn't give residents a lot of confidence in allowing these plants to really self-regulate. The EPD now has deployed an emergency response system. The state is now taking action. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is, like I said numerous times, it's very personal to me. So I've done some intense research as it relates to this subject. And one of the things that does concern me a little bit is that I do think that this may be being used a bit much for a political pull. That's not to say this is not important, but the actual toxin, the ethylene oxide, it's actually released through diesel trucks on a numerous basis. I mean, it's tons and tons of it released through diesel trucks. So and our bodies actually produce ethylene oxide as well. So I'm not saying there isn't something to be alarmed, but I do want to make sure that we're being careful that we're not creating fear or unnecessary fear in our constituents. And so when it comes to the actual gas leak and all of that, all of these employees are fully aware of the fact that they are working with gases that are highly combustible. So am sad that it happened, and not to take the shift from there, but I just want to make sure I get that in there, that, you know, we just got to make sure we're not making this too much of a political talking point.
Alexis, the Fulton County commissioners, along with the Atlanta School Board, say, you know what, they might look into testing the air around some of the schools like Bolton Academy,
Right.
Morris Brandon Elementary School. I think that's the right step. I mean, parents have a right to be concerned.
Absolutely, they definitely need to do that. And the other concern is the other place in Covington. That plant also has the same kind of issue of releasing toxins like that. But it's not only a political issue, it's a financial issue. That's what they're concerned about. They don't want to close the plant down because they'll lose money.
Phil, the EPD stepping in this week.
Well, that's right, and maybe to segue off of what Alexis is saying, it's a financial issue for several reasons, and that is that you just can't shut these plants down. And I tried to have a debate with Stacey Evans last week on this. Obviously, they're within the permitting process of both the state and federal guidelines. So if you shut them down, they will sue the state and it will cost the taxpayers millions of dollars. So that's a hysterical political point that Evans and others, Jen Jordan and others are trying to make.
But it did happen in Chicago, Theron.
Yeah, they did shut it down. But let's not brush this over, Lori. Sterigenics lied to the governor. All right, when they had an opportunity to disclose to the governor of what had happened, these explosions, these toxic release happened, you know, while the governor's office stepped in. So I don't want our viewers to know that the reason the governor call for this special investigation is because the information that was not disclosed to him when his office and the EPD stepped in, they had to basically say, okay, this independent monitoring team, this self-reporting that we've talked about for 5 weeks, it wasn't happening. And I agree with Alexis. I think that the school boards, the county commissioners, all these folks should do some testing, because while Janelle does make a good scientific point of something that I did not know, I still believe with an abundance amount of caution, we should test the air that our young people are breathing in these schools, and quite frankly, a lot of people who work and live in these areas. And so let's not sugarcoat this. The governor stepped in because he gave them the benefit of the doubt. He worked with them, but what came to his attention was that they had not fully disclosed information. So that's what led to the independent investigation.
And Janelle, that goes back to my issue of the self-regulation, the self-reporting. If it's not happening, and legally they said they don't have to report because the levels weren't high enough. So I get that. But what about this transparency issue?
Yeah, I think they're being very transparent as of now, and I promise I'm not a PR person for Sterigenics. However, just on my research, I mean, I think Sterigenics is doing the best they can to be as transparent as possible going forward. But I also think that we should talk about the shutting down keeps coming up, the whole option of shutting it down. Now, the actual method that's being used has been approved. It's the only method that's been approved by the FDA. So if we shut them down, that means that these medical devices that have a 2-week lifespan means that we now do have no means of sterilizing that, which will impact Grady Hospital, pediatrics, and things of that nature. So all I'm doing is bringing a different perspective to it, so we can look into it and make sure that we're seeing this from a well-rounded view.
All right. On that note,
I do think this, though. I don't like the lie either, Theron.
I mean, we got to call that.
And I think we would all agree. I think that we do need more testing.
Right, and we don't know that they're being transparent now. They say they are, and also I'll go back to my phrase with the speaker. They got caught. That's why they're being transparent.
and on that note, coming up, we will have winners and losers. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Theron, since you're back this week, you go first.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't here last week, so I want to start with Dr. Chris Edwards. You did a wonderful tribute to him and his family last week, Lori, so I just want to add my condolences to him and his family for their loss. I also want to make Johnny Isakson a winner. As I meant earlier, while I'm a Democrat, I think he's been a great leader for our state. And then lastly, a big $17.5 million gift from Arthur Blank to the Atlanta Beltline. This is one of the biggest donations that we've seen in our city around completing the Beltline. I want to give Arthur Blank a big shout out. He's got a philanthropic heart. He gives a lot to our different communities, and I definitely want to make him my winner.
All right, Phil.
Well, I will make the winner Senator Johnny Isakson, as we discussed at the first part of the segment. He was a pillar of the modern Republican Party, and he was liked on both sides of the aisle. And I think we would agree, some of us know Robbie Rivers, who was the longtime 20-year clerk of the House, who passed away at a too young age. age. Just a great guy who he ran everything and all those thousands of bills.
He really took care of the press corps, too.
He took care, you know that.
He really
members
did.
and new members.
All of that is correct. And my loser is the shameful, dirty cop, James Comey, the former FBI director. A scathing report by the Inspector General. It kind of vindicates President Trump. Comey was actually subverting the election of a democratically elected president.
Janelle,
Awesome.
I'm
So
sure you
I have-
agree with Phil on that.
Yes, I do. So I don't have a loser. I'll take that one. I also have, of course, Senator Johnny Isakson is a winner, a true example of leadership. And I also want to give the Georgia's first commission that was appointed by the governor a shout out and make them a winner as well. I attended an event this past week where we had over 150 black business owners at the governor's mansion to discuss, small business and how the government can work together. So shout out to that. You were there, and so wonderful.
I didn't mention that.
There was there.
Yeah,
so
Security
that's
is lit.
definitely a winner for me. Definitely a winner for me.
Alexis.
Okay, I'm going to salute Coco Gauff. She's our local tennis great. She's in the U.S. Open this weekend, and I hope she makes it to the next round. She's doing great so far.
We're rooting for her.
Also, Willie Mae Hardy, who's 111 years old, oldest resident in Kirkwood, is going to get her whole home remodeled thanks to Lowe's, and also community folks who are pitching in because a story was done on her. She had no air conditioning, and now she's getting air conditioning plus. So
Good
it's
for
great.
Lowe's. All right. Well, a shout out to Representative Patty Bentley, whom I met this week. She appreciates the fact that the Georgia Gang, as you mentioned, Theron, is on YouTube because they tune in every week down in Butler, Georgia, which is in Taylor County. And of course, my winner too, Senator Johnny Isakson. Thank you so much for all of your service. I know you've got a few more months to go. You're definitely one of the best, even in the eyes of the media, which is not easy.
Say that too. Everybody else said congratulations.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.